They shoved me into the night like I was just cargo cuffs biting my wrists, rain hitting hard enough to sting rotor wash in my ears, and the black mouth of the ocean opening up beneath me. And for a second I thought, so this is what it feels like when your brothers in arms decide you're a problem. Gravity can fix, you know what I mean? And then the door frame slid past my boots and the sky took me not gently, not with any mercy, just a rip and a drop, and the storm saying, "Let's see what you're made of." I didn't scream, I didn't pray, I counted. One breath to get my head right, one angle to buy another second one. Promise I could give myself that if I lived, I'd make the truth louder than their orders. My name is Maya Reeves. I was a captain once, a combat pilot who ferried wounded kids out of bad places and flew into weather. Sane people waited out, and I used to believe loyalty was a straight line. But that night, inside the transport faces I trusted turned into silhouettes. I couldn't read. Men who had laughed with me refused to meet my eyes. And the commander, the one whose signature showed up on too many miracle deliveries that never went through, leaned in so close I could smell old coffee and power and said, "You were never supposed to see this far, Captain." I had seen enough, that was the problem. I had traced ghost pallets and forged reports, found flight plans sold to private warlords, learned how a few officers who wore the same flag as me turned corridors of mercy into pipelines for profit. And when I followed that trail to the boots sitting across from me, their solution wasn't a court, it was a door latch. Gravity did what gravity does, and training did what training does too. Panic is loud, but it doesn't help. Muscle memory is quiet, and it saves you. So I tucked my knees, rolled my shoulder, fought the cuffs enough to twist my fall, took a breath that tasted like rain and metal and fear, and thought of my dad telling me never surrender, altitude or hope, and then the water rose up like a wall and took me under. Everything turned white, then black, then pain. Like my ribs were arguing with the ocean, and the storm pressed a hand on my head to see if I'd stay down. But I'm stubborn. I'm a pilot. I angle into crosswind. I came up coughing salt and lightning and the sound of rotors shrinking into distance, and I kicked toward a rusted buoy bobbing like a tired guardian, hooked my cuff chain under a jagged rung, let the swell do the work, felt skin tear and steel groan and finally snap, and for a minute I just floated, bleeding and breathing, counting waves and thinking about the good soldiers we lost to bad decisions. Dawn scraped the edge of the sky. The storm thinned to mist, and I dragged myself onto a narrow shelf of rock that smelled like diesel and kelp knees, buzzing teeth chattering so hard I sounded like a broken radio. And I found a fishing shack half swallowed by weather inside a first aid kit no one had loved in years, a coil of wire, a cracked mirror, a flare gun with no flares, and a radio that hated me but still had enough stubborn to hiss. I stitched what I could, whispering names of people the reports erased, not prayers, just names that kept a little fire going, and I pried open the radio guts, coaxed a heartbeat out of static until a supply vessel's distress call drifted through like it had been meant for me. I rigged a beacon using the mirror, and the busted lens flashed. Morse across the bay, waited with the patience you only earn when you've run out of choices, and when a lifeboat nosed in at dusk, I stepped from behind the rocks soaked and very much done being polite, and said, "Help me reach the mainland." And something in my voice, call it authority, call it a promise, made them nod before their brains caught up. Wrapped in a tarp that smelled like fish and rust, I watched the coastline shrink and made a plan, not for revenge, exactly for exposure, because bullets silence people, but light silences lies, and if I could drag what I knew into daylight fast enough, even men who lived in shadows would have to blink. I needed an ally outside the chain of command, someone who remembered everything and trusted no one, so I used a stolen ID at a payphone that still worked and breathed into the receiver when I heard a familiar voice go quiet before my name. Annika Joe. She said she'd burned bridges for a reason, but for me she'd leave a rope on a tree, and within hours she had a route stitched together. An underground airstrip outside Lisbon, a decommissioned surveillance drone under false registry, a flask of coffee that tasted like cardboard, and a look that said, "Don't ask if this is smart, ask if it's necessary." We sat under bad lights and unrolled our lives onto a table, and I told her what I found before they threw me out of the skybank trails that curved into defense contractors and then climbed into senior command signatures. I could match voices, we could pull if we got a little lucky. And she rubbed her temple and said, "This rot goes higher than I thought." And that was our twist right there in the hum of the hangar. We weren't just poking at a few dirty officers, we were about to light up a whole ladder. I spent the flight reassembling a small transmitter from scavenged parts, fingers doing the work my brain didn't have energy to narrate, city lights below us, like constellations of normal lives, people who will never know their safety was a line on a spreadsheet someone tried to sell. And when we landed, Annika handed me a badge that said interpreter, because sometimes hiding in plain sight is easier than hiding at all. I could have disappeared, she said quietly. Start over somewhere. Nobody knows your name. And I said, I'm not built to vanish. And maybe that was pride. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the simple truth that if I didn't finish what I started, I'd be falling forever. We mapped the target, a security summit in Geneva, dressed up like a peace fair, a glass fortress on the lake full of guards and polished smiles with General Corson, the man who signed the orders, and Director Vale, the liaison who could lie without blinking, and Colonel Hughes, the fixer who made red tape bleed, all scheduled to shake hands under chandeliers, and we decided to walk among them unseen, record everything, and transmit to the world before anyone with a badge and a cable cutter could blink. 2 days of forging credentials and rebuilding my strength taught me I could do delicate work with hands that had punched water for hours, that I could look at a mirror and not flinch when I saw someone who died on paper and came back with edges, and when I tucked my hair under a simple clip and clipped the earpiece in, I felt something settle, not peace, not joy, just alignment. The drone lifted at dawn, a tiny hummingbird with a very big memory, and Anika's voice came through the bud in my ear with that low, steady, calm eyes on your skies. And I walked in through revolving doors like I had an errand, not a mission, skirted through elevators where my reflection broke into slivers and came back whole. And I took a booth at the media station I'd already compromised that morning, slid a drive disguised as a translator chip into the console, and let my heart slow down, because the moment before you hit transmit is its own kind of free fall. The summit logo pulsed on the screens. Someone on stage started a speech nobody would remember, and I whispered one word that tasted like salt and lightning transmit, and across the hall the world tilted. It doesn't happen all at once, not even when you plan it first. It looks like a glitch. Then someone's eyebrows go up, then phones start buzzing, then the screens fill with the drone's live feed bank records and audio of secret meetings and flight manifests linking private accounts to illegal armed shipments. And the hum in the room shifts from bored to frightened to angry, and I stepped out of the booth and let them see me, not because I needed the moment, but because I wanted Corson to understand who he tried to erase. His eyes found me slow, like his brain was wading through wet concrete, and then he understood, and for a second he looked small, not from far away, but from inside himself, pride falling off his shoulders like a bad jacket. Vale lunged for the console, yanking cables that didn't matter because the drone had already mirrored the signal to global networks. Anika seated, and around the world headlines bloomed like fireworks, and I could almost hear the click of people who had been told to shut up sitting forward in their chairs. A mercenary disguised as security made a terrible choice and drew a weapon, and maybe he thought he could put the genie back in, but what he did was give me a clean focus. He fired once, glass exploded, like winter alarms screamed, and I moved without narration, muscle memory, writing the next line, a roll, a disarm, a strike, the gun skidding across marble into a woman's heel, her face fierce, and then real. Law enforcement roared in from the lake helicopters, throwing a white torrent of light through the broken ceiling sirens, folding into a sound I will always understand, relief. I met Corson near the balcony. He hissed, "You don't understand. We were protecting national interests." And I stepped closer, eyes on his, and said, "You were protecting your bank account." And I gripped his wrist, forced the weapon down, and handed it to the officers, because the law deserves the chance to finish what conscience starts. They cuffed him with a click that sounded like a door opening somewhere else. Vale tried to look offended at gravity. Hughes tried to fade. Reporters didn't let him, and the feed kept running, because that was the point. Not a single switch to yank, not one cable to pull, just light, bouncing between 100 mirrors, until the room itself had to admit the truth. Anika's voice crackled in my ear. "It's done. You're alive everywhere." And I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. Shoulders sagging in a way that wasn't defeat, more like a pack finally set down. And I walked through chaos like a woman on her way home, past cameras and shouting and faces I didn't have the bandwidth to memorize. And I found the lake quiet, despite the sirens. Dipped my hand in the water, felt cold, clarity soak into my skin, and I thought they threw me out of the world. They just gave me the sky back. Here's the part you don't see on the viral clips, the part after the applause when the room empties and the adrenaline turns to gravity again, when you notice your hands shaking and realize you haven't eaten since another life, when a housekeeper hugs you and disappears before you can get her name. When a cop with a limp, you remember from a flood response, nods at you. Like this time he gets to help when someone says hero in a tone that makes you want to sit on the floor and cry and laugh because words are always too small. I gave a statement full of verbs because verbs do more work than adjectives. Yeah, that happened, and I said I'd cooperate, and I meant it. And on the walk out of the hotel, I saw a reflection in broken glass, and for a second I thought of the fall, the way the ocean tried to hold me forever. And I said thanks out loud, not to anyone in particular, just to breathe and bone, and the stubborn part of me that refused to be a line in a report. You ask if I'm scared they'll try again. Sure, fear is a speed bump, not a wall. I check my mirrors twice. I sleep with my boots where I can find them. I keep a go bag by the door and a copy of the file in 3 places. No one would think to look. And I also keep my coffee right here, because mornings deserve rituals, even for ghosts. The twist keeps twisting by the way investigations started peeling up floorboards and found more rot contracts that were never supposed to see daylight got read under bright bulbs. People who used to smile at cameras suddenly needed lawyers, and the old story about 1 or 2 bad actors had to widen to fit the truth, which is uncomfortable and good. Not everyone loves it. Some folks said, I broke the rules and put lives at risk. Some folks said, I saved lives that would have been lost to quiet theft. And maybe both can be true. Maybe the world doesn't fit in clean boxes, and we do our best to draw lines where harm stops and justice starts. I don't need to be called a hero. I don't need to be called reckless. I need 2 things. For the people who were brave enough to talk to stay safe, and for the next person who finds a door with a drop behind it to remember that the fall is not the end. It can be a route if you angle into it just right. I still hear the storm sometimes when the room is too quiet, still feel the helicopter door under my palm, still taste salt when I'm not anywhere near the sea. Trauma has a funny way of carrying its own weather, but I also hear something else now, a different hum, the sound a city makes when the truth finally breaks through the static. When people who never met each other start sending links and saying, look, 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 and that sound is worth the bruises. If you're listening and you've been dismissed, underestimated, told to hush because your voice is inconvenient, I'm not telling you to jump. I'm telling you to learn how to fall well, to find the buoy, to use the rust, to break the cuff, to flash a signal when the sun finally shows up, to find one person who will move mountains in a hangar for you, because one is often enough. I was supposed to be a ghost, but ghosts don't get to touch the future. And today I did. I watched power flinch at light. I watched a door that had been locked for years blow off its hinges. I watched a woman in a blue dress stomp a gun, like she'd been waiting her whole life for that chance. And I thought maybe the world is tired, but it isn't done. So talk to me. Was I right to break rules to break something bigger? Or do you think I lit a match in a room full of gas? Do you believe exposing corruption this way saves lives, or just rearranges blame? Have you seen something like this where you live a system that looked clean until it rained? A person who fell and found a way to fly anyway? Drop your thoughts in the comments, argue with me if you want. Tell me where you're watching from and what you've seen hit. Like if you felt that shift when light hit the room, subscribe. If you think sunlight should be standard issue, and share this with one person who's standing at a door they didn't choose, because maybe all they need is to hear that falling isn't the same thing as failing, and that if the sky tries to throw you out, you can still come back with a storm.